Hello and welcome back to the RevOps show. If you've been with us on this journey for a while now, you'll know that we talk about system design quite often. And if you're just tuning in for the first time, welcome. Go back and listen to all the episodes prior to this one to see what I'm talking about. But when it comes to system design, what exactly is it that we're talking about? And more importantly, what does it mean for RevOps and where can you get started? Doug and Jess have a great amount of insights ahead of us, so let's play that intro music.
Jess, happy Friday.
Happy Friday, man.
Gardeners.
There it is.
Go!
This is gonna be a great episode. I can tell already.
It is gonna be great. It is gonna be great. By the way, if you go on LinkedIn, you'll see that you were mentioned on LinkedIn.
Was I? By who? You?
No. God, I'm going blank on her name. Somebody listened to the episode from last week.
Oh.
On the mistakes and basically said, has anybody in RevOps ever been called the Department of Sales Prevention? And they had the little hand raised emoji and takeaways, etc. So I saw it just before I came on. So I'm like, I'm all ready to. I'm like, what are we talking about? RevOps, RevOps journey. Let's go, RevOps.
You're Jess.
You know what else? You know what else has happened since our last episode, Jess?
We closed business.
Of course.
Oh, okay.
But something even more special than that.
What happened?
You don't know?
No.
Opening day was yesterday.
Oh God. Okay. I'm sorry. I didn't realize opening. It's off schedule. I can't keep track.
Yesterday was New Year's Day.
I should have known opening day was yesterday. I saw the Reds won, and they said
they did.
Yeah, they did.
Suck. I can tell you about the 1976 starting lineup for the Reds. I cannot tell you. I don't know if I could tell you a player on the team this year.
So they suck, apparently.
You know, when I was a kid, Jess, there was a time where I could have told you the starting lineup for every team in Major League Baseball.
I believe it. Not anymore.
So, on my Twitter feed, Buster Olney or Bob Nightingale or somebody had, tweeted what the opening day lineup was for a team. And this is the first time ever that I can recall this, because usually I can figure out who the team is, because I would still know enough. I did not recognize a single name. I have no idea what team. I don't even know if it was a real lineup.
I'm disappointed in you.
Oh, I'm disappointed in myself. I think that is the oldest I have ever felt. I don't think I want to be back when I knew the starting lineup for every team. That was probably a little too much, but
yeah.
So what are we talking about today,
we are not here to talk about baseball.
We are always here to talk about baseball. Let's just make that clear.
Okay. I want to talk
or a pun. One of those two things takes precedence over.
It's true. It's true.
You know what you call a zoo with all dogs, right? It's a Shih Tzu.
But okay. I want to talk about system design today. Aren't you excited?
I am.
we
Shark do baby shark do baby shark.
Alrighty, let's talk about what I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
The people who don't watch the video don't get the full effect of my reaction to your randomness.
It makes me happy.
So we talk about system design a lot on the podcast. So
Jess, my soundboard wasn't working, so I actually wasn't listening to you. So can you repeat what our segue to the topic is, just so I'm on the same page?
I want to talk about system design.
We're talking about system design today. Okay, cool.
System design. That's what the topic is for today.
No, I thought we were talking about something else. So that's good. We're good. I know you slacked me something, but it wasn't clear to me. So
it is Friday, people. We are focused. We are locked in. We are ready to go. So we hit on system design a lot in the podcast, so I thought it would be good for us to talk about just system design as a topic. So first of all, what is system design? How would you explain system design?
You know, it's funny because I got asked this question from somebody that direct messaged me on Slack. I'm sorry, on LinkedIn. After watching our RevOps webinar on setting up, structuring successful RevOps, and it kind of hit me that I can talking about system design in a way that fits into a single podcast is probably harder than I than what I thought. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this from. We actually have a blog post and video on what is system design and how does it apply, et cetera. So first I'm going to give kind of the global element. System design comes from design theory. So system design is the approach to understand, design, and systemize the flow of value from various aspects of an organization through the value chain. So how a company creates value, generates value, to ensure synchronicity. And I'm not talking about just the police here, Jess. To ensure synchronicity, consistency, integration, and maximization, you could say optimization, between people, activities, process, policies, places, and resources. So basically, what system design is everything, right? It's bringing everything into account. And we talk about in the revenue acceleration framework, we talk about the second level is structure. Really, system design is the embodiment of structure, right? And the reason that I call it out individually is people talk about tech as a system. And so when we talk about systems, more people than not, at least in the business world that I've dealt with, have a tendency to view tech, application, and system as synonyms. So we're talking about in implementation, somebody's on HubSpot, and I say, you need to understand what the underlying system is. And they're like, oh, it's HubSpot. I'm like, no, that's not the underlying system. That's the tool. That's the tech. Now, the process of system design is the ongoing process. How does this apply to doing system design on an ongoing, regular basis? It's the ongoing process of making trade-offs. That's a word that comes up a lot in our podcast, doesn't it?
It is.
The process of making ongoing trade-offs and adjustments necessary to align all vectors, right? All your elements of what's involved to generate motion, to align all vectors to maximize value creation within, and this is an important one, within the constraints that exist, right? And so where I see people fall off is they design or they think about design for the perfect world. They think about design, and if you look at most people talking about what someone should do or whatever, there's an underlying assumption that, as an example, resources aren't limited. And that's why I always say that, when I first got into this world of business advisory, and I used to consume books. That was, people asked me who was my mentor, and my answer was actually about 300 different books. And what I discovered is I'd read or learn, and some consultant or some author, and it would turn out, where they did all this, they were at GE, back in GE's heyday. I'm like, okay. And by the way, I'm not taking away that there's a lesson to be learned, but the difficulty is that GE's in a completely different world. I would joke around and say, look, hey, if I could write, if I could issue $2 billion in bonds at a 2.1% interest rate, I could do a lot of things that I can't consider right now. I remember this is when I fell in love with Brian Halligan at HubSpot. It was the first inbound I went to. And there was a session for partners about what partners can learn from HubSpot's journey to, I guess they were probably about $100 million then, somewhere around there. And someone had asked a question, and each of the executives was answering, and then Brian picked up and goes, now look, everybody, one thing to keep in mind when we're talking about this is realize we have raised $100 million. So what we're doing or what we did, that may not apply for you. And I was like, oh my God, finally somebody said that. So, this is why I don't believe in right and wrong. This is why I don't believe in, right or wrong as it relates to implementation. Not as it relates to my value system. And why so much of, the first answer is always, it depends, seek to understand before you answer. is everybody's got different sets of constraints. And by the way, not all constraints are physical. I would say most constraints are not physical. Most constraints are mental. And I think the other element that people have a tendency to do is they look at constraints as bad. It's kind of a negative word, isn't it?
It is.
It sounds negative. Why does it sound like, is that just because we've learned it? I mean, constraint, it's like the German language. Everything sounds like it's bad. Someone's done something wrong. But, constraint just kind of has negativity written all over it. The thing, going back to last week's episode where we talked about friction for traction, with no constraints, you have no direction. And if you actually get into design theory, what you realize is that the constraint, in the constraint is the answer. So it's about managing trade-offs, and the trade-offs that you're managing are feasibility. How hard will this be? Viability. Will this stick? Will it sustain? And desirability. How disruptive will it be? Will people like it? And you have to realize this is going on while everything is changing. So there is no place where you're there and it's like, okay, done. And that's why system design is so important. And that's where the proverbial, you're changing the engine of an airplane flying at 35,000 feet. And what's interesting is, why do companies raise money? Companies raise money because of the J curve. And for those of you that don't know what the J curve is that whenever you start a new initiative, you go down before you go up. Put it in another way, you may be familiar with the phrase, you got to spend money to make money, right? It's never been said you got to make money to spend money, right? With the theory being I get to make the money before I spend the money. And by the way, the faster you want to grow, the more you got to spend before you get the money, right? And so the reason for, why does GE issue $2.1 billion worth of bonds? Because of the J curve, right? Why do companies raise money? Because of the J curve. You look at Imagine. When we started, we weren't allowed to have a J curve. Yeah. J curve meant death. Someone came into me one time and was telling me what we needed to do and actually had predicted where the J curve was. And I said, okay, great. Who are the 3 people I lay off between here and the bottom of the J curve? Yeah. And then how do I execute on this plan with those 3 fewer people? And their response was, well, Doug, you have to understand, you got to invest before. No, I get that. Yeah. Right. But by the way, if I had that money to invest, if I could take that J curve, I probably wouldn't have been out looking for someone to help, provide that answer. So it's understanding all that while you're executing. It's understanding that you're never the company you want to be, and learning how to be okay with that. And so that design of the system is the structure, and that is the invisible hand that drives everything. And that's why documenting business process, things like that, is so important. So you kind of dug into the purpose. You talked about providing structure, maximizing value. That's the purpose of it. Why is it important though? Like I understand what it is, but why is that? Why is system design so important? Why do we always go back to system design? Why is oxygen important, Jess? So I had a coach, not super early, so I guess midway into my career, who said, you're always either a part of your system or someone else's. And then he followed that up by saying, put another way, you can be the windshield or you can be the bug. And there are fundamentally 3 systems. If you think about it, there's your system, their system, and no system. No system is anarchy and chaos. And by the way, no system is a system. There's somebody else's system. And that's, by the way, why I've never, a mantra I've always lived by is your competition is irrelevant. And that doesn't mean that your competition doesn't matter. It just means it's irrelevant, because if I view the world through the lens of my competitor, then I'm playing my competitor's game. It's why I've never worried about people stealing our stuff. It's why I share what I share on these podcasts. Because guess what? If you want to share my stuff, you're going to play my game. And if we're going to play my game, I have enough confidence that even if you're going to play it, I'm going to be able to beat you at it. Now, what I have even more confidence in, actually, because people know that part about me, and so they think I'm arrogant. But what is actually more true is that I know if I play your game, you will beat me.
Yeah.
Right. So what I know is I know how to win at my game. And every time I play somebody else's game, maybe not every time, but a hell of a lot more frequently than when I play my game. I mean, candidly, even when I win, I end up losing. And so it's not sustainable. So there's always a system at play. I mean, Adam Smith called it the invisible hand of capitalism, or maybe he just called it the invisible hand. The invisible hand is the system. Now, what I'm going to say is that probably at best 2/3 to 3/4 of the system is invisible. You'll never actually be able to define it clearly, understand it, etc. And the reason for that is there's just far too much complexity. Jess, if a butterfly flaps its wings in Transylvania, it rains in San Antonio. Right. I'm a big believer of I'm going to be in somebody's system. So I just as soon it'd be mine. And I just as soon be as intentional as possible. And by the way, sometimes intentionality is choosing where you're not going to be intentional. Right. So like I have this really interesting relationship with AI, and I'm aware of it. It actually interests me. I'm really curious about it. I don't pay a lot of attention to it though. And I actually sometimes work to not pay attention to it because I know if I started to, I'd get sucked in. My read on it is that there are people that are going to take advantage of it, and they're going to get advantages from it. And they have an understanding and a development that I don't have. And as best I can tell for us and in the world that we're in, it has marginal impact. So I have, enough understanding. Someone's going to say, well, 5 years from now, you're going to regret if you don't do that, if you don't pay all of your attention to that. And I'm going to be like, well, that operates on the assumption that if I paid all of my attention on that, I would be making enough of the right choices to navigate it successfully. And I don't think that, that's my game. So that's the wrong system for me to be in. How do I make that trade-off decision? We talk about data all the time. We talk about clean data all the time. Just had this conversation today. It's a trade-off. If there were no constraints, if there was no resource allocation, if humans were not involved, then clean your data before you move your data would be a mantra we'd live by.
Right.
But what I know is when you try to clean your data, you pull a little thread that ends up taking forever. And I know that in a system involving change, momentum is critical. And there's nothing that stalls momentum faster than trying to clean up data. And by the way, one of the reasons for that is because as long as I'm cleaning it up, I'm not going to have a problem. And oh, by the way, my system is still working because I'm in the old system, right? I'm in my application is still working because I'm in the old application. So it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Well, I go to the new, now if the data cleanup hurts my momentum, that's okay because we're working in that system now, right? It's not the same thing. We're not getting to that change. So understanding those constraints is why we take that path. System design is why, our conversation, I think it was last week, or maybe it was the week before, about, the email that got sent to me for inbound marketing for, utilizing HubSpot better. And why I said, no, they were absolutely right to send that to me.
Right.
Right. Because, if resources were no issue, if there were no constraints, then no, they shouldn't have sent it to me. But that's why, because you can't, system design is basically establishing the game, and it sets the rules that you play by. And so do you want to have a better chance of understanding the rules of your game? Or would you just as soon, without system design, it's like playing Uno with your 2-year-old daughter, where you think after a few times, you're eventually going to pick up the pattern.
Yeah.
What she's going to do. And you can't, because it's not just that whenever it happens. I mean, the only thing that's consistent about playing Uno with your 2 to 6-year-old daughter is she always wins.
Yep.
But she doesn't always win with Uno.
Right.
Right. So you can't and again, I'm good at pattern recognition. I could not figure out a pattern. That was her system, right? And so whenever I was playing Uno with her, and I don't think I'm the only one that's experienced this, I was playing her game. I was in her system. So that's why system design is important. It's, do you want to be the shield or do you want to be the bug?
It's understanding the game. It's being able to make better decisions. It's understanding the
I would say it's better understanding the game. I mean, because again, I think in the game that we play in life and in business, I don't think you ever understand the game.
Right.
And by the way, every time you begin to understand the game changes.
This is true. So
that is why the greatest asset to anybody probably, but I'm going to say to any strategist, and this might be something I run with a little bit more. I think most people who call themselves strategists define themselves as having great answers. Answers are tactics at best. Questions are good questions. That's where the strategy is. The ability to ask really good questions. So what system design does is it enables you to ask better questions. Show me the person asking themselves and others the better question. I'll show you the person that's winning the game.
So where do you start with system design? I like what you talked about where you said your system, their system, and no system, because we talk about this with clients a lot where, they say they have nothing, and we talk to them about that's no system, that no system is a system. So where do you start if you're trying to,
Here? Mm-hmm. You are here.
Tell me more.
So I thought you were asking me these questions because we had talked about, our RevOps journey. So that's where I thought that these questions were still under the umbrella of. And
yep.
And so where do you start? I actually thought that the question was going to be more about where do you start RevOps? And what I was going to say is like, you don't have to worry about starting RevOps. You don't have to worry about starting system design. It's going on. It's happening. You're making choices. You're making decisions. You might not be making full decisions, right? but you're making decisions. By the way, when I say making full decisions, I'm not being sarcastic. There are a lot of people who like to say yes to things. They just can't stand saying no. And I don't mean the explicit no. I mean, when you say yes to this, you have to realize you're saying no to a bunch of other things, or that yes is meaningless. But by the way, if you say yes to something without correspondingly saying, proverbially saying no to the other things, that's a system, and you're in that system, and that's the design of your system, right? So here's what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you that your system is perfectly designed to produce the results that you're getting.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
I used to ask the question, how many people here would describe their sales organization as being high functioning, consistent, predictable, with few to no surprises? And I'd ask a group of, I'd be presenting to a group of 15 to 20 CEOs, and maybe one or two people would raise their hand. And my response, I've asked this question to, hundreds of audiences. I've had thousands of responses. And what I get is about, a 5 to 15% yes rate. And most of that is kind of a hesitant yes.
Yeah.
And what I say is, look, if 80% of audiences responded yes to this question and you didn't, then you have a problem with your sales team. But when 80% of organizations respond no, then there's a problem with the system. The traditional function of sales, still dominant today, is designed to produce herky-jerky, inconsistent, disruptive, unpredictable results with lots of disruptions and surprises. And how do I know that? Because that's what the vast majority of them do, right? That's the system. You want to change that? Don't talk to me about changing the behavior. Don't talk to me about intent. Identify what's the underlying structure, right? What's, where's the underlying incentive? Where's this? What's happening here? What is beginning to cause so where do you start with system design? You've already started. You're designing your system every day. You're making these trade-offs every day, whether you realize it or not. So simply becoming aware of it. We talk about the 3 zones of execution. Just beginning to bring that in to say, here's the most important question that that anyone can answer from a system design standpoint if you want to start now. What are you not going to focus on?
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And not what are you not going to focus on? That's not the same thing as the to stop list or do not do list. I'm talking
Right.
about of the 7 critical initiatives that you have,
Yep.
right, that are absolutely positively must have. Which one are you going to ignore right now? Which 2 are you going to ignore? Or what elements are you going to ignore right now?
Yeah.
What dysfunction are you going to accept right now? Right? Because you can't begin to create the space to work on something until you accept the fact that you're not going to work on other things. And so the 3 zones of execution says, what's the next 90 days? That's all about the results, the objectives that we need to hit. What's the long term? And then where's our enablement zone? And I like to look at the enablement zone as enablement 1, 2, and 3, right? So the enablement zone 1 is and by the way, RevOps is an enablement zone discipline. You can watch the 3 zones of execution in the blog post. We also have a 3 zones of execution piece in how we work. But so like my sales team, my implementers, et cetera, they're in the performance zone. It's about getting the things done that need to get done to hit the objective. What my first enablement zone is, it's staging what are the changes that are coming. This is why you've heard us talk in the adoption conversation that you're launching every 4 months. You're launching 4 times per year. So it's like, that enablement 1 is the 90 days, it's day 91 to 180. And then you could have enablement zone 2 and 3, which would be each quarter, or you might go to enablement 2, which is the 6 months between. And you kind of get this water fountain effect as you're staging things, and you go, okay, great. You know what? We're going to push this out. Because here's the other thing that I've learned. Everything takes longer than you think it's going to take.
This is true.
And you know what's interesting about that? That's okay. Okay, so this is going to be a really big stretch. You know the show This Is Us?
Yes.
Someone called it tragic porn.
It's accurate.
So it's in its final season, and one of the things the show does is it does flash forwards and it shadows certain things. So one of the kids, Kevin, who's Hollywood star, never in a relationship, he ends up marrying somebody. And I saw an interview with the actor who plays Kevin, and he was kind of telling about the story, and what he said was, you're going to love the ending. By the way, what actor in a show doesn't say you're going to love the ending? Even Anthony, Michael Hall from Dexter said you're going to love the ending for the first round of Dexter. Anyhow, and what he said was, it wasn't, it's kind of showing the arc that once Kevin becomes, once he accepts and becomes okay with being alone, that's when he finds that's when he makes the connection. And there's a lot of truth there, right? Like you have to, once you learn that you can be alone, then you can be with someone, truly be with someone. I actually tweeted the other day, if you're in SaaS sales and you feel like you need to do a demo to be able to make the sale, then you ain't in SaaS sales. And someone said, well, I used to think that way, but you should do a demo. I said, no, I'm not saying don't do a demo. I'm saying once you don't need to do a demo, that's when your demo can become valuable.
Yeah.
So, and holy cow, because it's Friday, I forgot where, how we got into this. What was the,
you were talking about,
once you realize that it's going to take longer.
Once you realize,
once you realize that's okay, you can actually start making progress.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. And so when you put something into an enablement zone 2, it doesn't have to be in enablement zone 1 next. It's the percolating thing. So if you have, here's the stuff we're doing.
Right.
Here's the stuff we're staging. Here's the stuff we're percolating. And here's the stuff that we're toying with and beginning to, right? Then you know what? If the performance zone ends up taking more than 90 days for you to get the system can accept that. The difficulty is in most systems, without calling out this intentionality, it's now or later.
Right.
And later has no definition.
Yep.
And so everything becomes, so if it matters, it's now.
That's why it's so important to call out what you're not going to focus on.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, but also kind of like, so the design of our system is 3 execution zones, right? And just by saying that, right? Internally, just by saying that and repeating that and asking the question, what execution zone is that in?
Yeah.
Like, and you've seen this. You don't have to do anything else.
Right.
Right. Your kid says, "Mommy, can I do this?" You get one response if you give him an answer. You get another response if you just say, "Do you think you should?"
Yeah.
Right. That's a system design choice. You don't have to do anything, right? And you change the system that you're in. That's what says, so you can't be consistent if you don't know what to be consistent about. That's why. Oh, so where do you start? So,
yeah,
start somewhere, right? Like, why
start?
It's the old Chinese proverb: the best time to plant a tree was 100 years ago. The second best time is now.
Yeah.
Oh, here's what you do: you figure out, put the list of all the critical things that are going on. And then ask the question, if I can only focus on one thing, which one thing would have the biggest impact on all the other things?
And that's where you start.
And you know what? If it turns out that you're wrong, don't go through some survey process and assessment and you spend the next 6 months figuring out which is the one thing and you do a regression analysis. Just freaking guess and get started. Or bring in a business process system design advisory organization and we'll tell you where to start.
What are some of the biggest challenges that you run into? So I'm actually interested when you get into system design and you're trying to plot this out. What are some of the biggest challenges that you run into?
Tell me more about what you're asking. I'm not fully following.
So, like you talked about, once you realize that it's going to take a long time, that kind of frees you, sort of. So where are places that people get stuck? Where are places that just start? Yeah, I get it, but where are the places that this gets hung up, that it's hard to kind of do system design and outline your system?
So one thing, and I'm sorry to be semantical, I didn't say it takes a long time. I said it takes longer than you think it will.
Okay.
And
that's fair. Yeah, no, you're right.
And that's a different thing. I think that, well, we were talking about a phase 1 pilot that we're going through with a client that's basically going from a no system. And by the way, very large organization. And all kinds of messes are being found out in this, and and that's not where it's supposed to be. And people are getting, people are beginning to get frustrated. And that's the first place where your natural approach is to go, you flinch, you break, and you, as a result, change what you're doing so you can get, quote unquote, back on the right track, except you're on the right track because the purpose of this is to find all of those messes. It's like step 1 is we need the truffle pig.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I think their initial reaction was like, shut it down. Shut it down.
Now the mistake that was made, and where I think we're going to emphasize this in the next similar situation even more, is they thought we were managing their expectations when we said the promise is for group 1, it's gonna be messy.
Right.
And part of their fear was, well, if we tell you it's going to be difficult and messy, no one's going to want to participate. But that's actually not true. There's a subset of the people that are like, cool, that'll be fun.
It's exciting.
Right. I'm like, it's going to be messy. Okay, cool. See, the problem that I have, and I'm actually in this, I was in an early stage beta, almost alpha, in terms of where it was. And I'm like, yeah, I'm happy to put up the messes because I think this is going to be something worthwhile. I'm going to be able to break it. We're going to I'm going to be involved in helping to find where the shit is. Except the reason that I'm frustrated with it is they've already made the decisions.
Right. Yeah.
Like, why are you asking me for feedback? Why are you asking me for feedback?
Yeah.
Why am I supposed to go and find this break shit? And then you tell me, oh, well, no, this is why we're doing it that way. I'm like, no, I understand. Look, you're smart people. I know you have a rationale for doing this. This doesn't work.
So are you saying the challenge is that it's not smooth, it's bumpy, it's messy?
Oh, I mean, so it's like this idea of right.
Yeah.
And again, this is why this is enablement zone stuff. It's not performance zone stuff.
Yeah.
Right. It's understanding that yes, we're still doing this, and so we're boxing that in, which is why it should take more time.
Right.
What's the fastest way to increase your velocity? Slow down. There's a massive effort. Like, everybody wants to be done. Everybody wants to achieve the status of done.
Yeah.
By the way, this is why Agile is valuable. This is why Agile works when Agile is done properly. Do you know why Agile works when it's done right?
Because it's iterations. You're not.
Nope, that's not why.
Okay, why?
Because lots of people iterate and get stuck in the middle. Everything in the middle feels like failure.
Mm-hmm.
What's the key component to Agile?
The sprint.
And at the end of the sprint, what's your status?
I don't remember. It's been a while.
Done.
It is done. Okay.
You're done.
Yeah. Okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah. Okay. You've got the. Okay. Yeah.
It's done.
Yeah.
Right. Then we do our next sprint.
Right. Yeah.
It's not, and hey, something that was supposed to be done in the first sprint wasn't done. That doesn't mean it's in the next sprint.
Right.
And if it's in the next sprint, it's in the next sprint as it's, and it's done.
Sprint too. Yeah.
So you're getting that iteration, right? But you're always in a state of done. You're never more than a week away or whatever your sprint is from being done, right? From being complete. The sprint's complete. What did we learn? Right? Action, result, learn. Action, result, learn. Sprint, Agile is about what's the action we're going to take? What's the hypothesis?
Mm-hmm.
What was the result? What did we learn?
Right.
Right. The scientific method is not intuitive. If it were, it wouldn't be the scientific method. It would be, you wouldn't need to name it anything. You would just call it being, right? The scientific method is hypothesis, outcome, learn.
Yeah.
Right. And if you go into academia, while the people who have a hypothesis and it turns out to be true, oftentimes then monetize that hypothesis to be, to be worth billions of dollars. And the people who have a hypothesis that fails are unable to monetize that. From the scientific perspective, a hypothesis that fails is every bit as valuable as a hypothesis that succeeds. And by the way, in a lot of cases, it's even more valuable because you learn typically much more from a hypothesis that fails than from a hypothesis that succeeds. And by the way, so much so that if you're doing something like a drug, and so you have a hypothesis, this chemical makeup that's going to produce a positive result, that if your hypothesis succeeds, it turns out, hey, this was proven valid. Do you know what you have to do before it can be considered valid? You have to do the null hypothesis. You now have to prove that nothing else was the reason.
Right.
Because it could have worked just because of luck. It could have worked because you just happened to pull the right group of people. Now, in business, we don't, we're not producing pharmacological substances that could create problems for people. So we don't necessarily have to have the same level of validity in what we're doing.
Right.
But I see people all the time talk about, well, we need to test, we need to experiment. I mean, how many clients we need to test this? And so we tested it and it doesn't work and now they're mad.
Yep.
Right. I tell people when I'm like, look, if you're hiring us because you're thinking we have the right answers, you're going to be disappointed.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I tell them the reason to hire us is because we're not going to have the right answers.
Yeah.
And most people in our situation, when they don't have the right answers, and they don't, they get stuck. They don't know what to do. We're like, okay, great. I mean, we're probably at our best right after something didn't work.
Oh, I agree. Yep.
Right. And, my brother calls it day 2. Everything's always perfect day 1. Everyone plans for day 1.
No one plans for day 2.
But day 2 is where the difference occurs. Again, that's where systems, so realizing that you're never in your ideal state. You're never the company you want to be. You're never the person that you want to be. Right. I mean, why do suicide rates go up? Because we're so committed to be the person we want to be. And the more we try to be the person we want to be, the more we become aware that we're not that person. And we can't live with the conflict. But when you can come and accept that, Like, so when you realize you're not the person you're never going to be the person you want to be.
Yeah.
That is either extraordinarily freeing or it is claustrophobic, whatever the opposite of freeing is, constraining, right? It sucks you down. And so I mean, I think that's the biggest, that is the biggest element. It's being able to be okay moving forward in doubt. I used to always ask the question, a leader's job is to provide certainty, but how can you provide certainty when there is so much doubt?
Yeah.
Well, one thing that you do, and by the way, this is system design. How long is your sprint? That's one aspect of system design.
Yeah.
I talk about the swing path. I talk about the inflection points in a sales process. How big should those inflection points be? Here's the question. How much variance occurs? Early on, you should have smaller inflection points. As things become more consistent, you can broaden those inflection points. As things become more predictable, right? When the seas are calm and the wind is consistent, your waypoints are distributed. When the winds pick up, the seas get heavy and the storms come in, you tighten your waypoints, right? It's situational. So again, it's also understanding that. It's understanding that, and by the way, in the world of sales and marketing, you're never going to be able to replicate your results because you'll never replicate the circumstance. So, accepting that it's progress. And by the way, especially in the early stages of progress, you know what happens when you start making progress?
What?
You get really upset because you learn a whole lot about what's wrong.
Yeah.
Right. And that feels like you've fallen backwards.
Yep.
Right. But that's just because you were ignorant, you were unaware, you were delusional. Those things are, what frees up system design is comfort with uncertainty. What clogs it is the desire for certainty. And by the way, that being said, it's also okay to say you don't control all of your outcomes, but you need to produce these outcomes by this time, or we're going to have to make a change. Both of those things are true.
Yeah. All right. So my big takeaways are system design provides.
Did I cover everything?
You did.
Wow.
We solved it. System design provides the structure, maximizes value, helps you manage the trade-offs within the constraints of the system. And then I also really liked what you said about system design enables you to ask better questions. Like, that's so true. I think we should be thinking about it that way. I don't think we think about what questions does it help us ask versus what answers does it give us.
I mean, I will tell you, the way you can assess the intelligence and capability of somebody is what's the quality of their questions.
And on that note, happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
And that's a wrap on this episode of the RevOps Show. Like Jess just mentioned, system design helped you to ask better questions. That's huge. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to go subscribe on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, leave us a review, and share the episode. If you have any questions you would like to ask Doug or Jess about system design or anything RevOps related, email me at hannah@imaginellc.com or hit us up on Twitter @demandcreator. Until next time, remember, can't solve your upstream problems downstream.